Apologize.
Hey everybody, it's Richard Harris here with another fantastic episode of Coronageddon and the Surf and Sales podcast with my friend Scott Leese and our other mutual really good friend. I've been looking forward to this one. He really needs no introduction other than his name, which is Morgan J Ingram, from John Barrows, J Barrows Sales Training. Good friend, a very astute, smart man, creator of the SDR Chronicles. And, I guess welcome to the show, Morgan. Thanks for coming on.
I need Richard to do all my intros moving forward.
Right? He's your hype man, dude. I
love it.
Yeah. So, Morgan, by the way, just out of curiosity, it's almost Hollywoodish, but what's the J stand for? It's like Michael J. Fox, right?
It stands for Joseph.
Okay.
And it's funny, when I first came out with the SDR Chronicles and was posting on LinkedIn, 3.5, 4 years ago, people thought it was fake. People thought I made up the J. And I was like, no, it's legit a thing. But now what I want to do is, you guys have seen it, shout out to Kevin Dorsey. He's got the KD in parentheses, and James Buckley has sales in parentheses. I just want to put the J in parentheses just to start messing with people. But and be it's a cool thing to do now. Yeah. But no, it's a real thing.
I started that trend a long time ago. Welcome to the 21st century. The old guy still has it. So just give everybody a little bit of context, Morgan, for those who don't know you. As much as we like to think we're all so important and everybody should know us, right? Because that's all of our attitudes and egos. Tell me, where'd you get your start? Where'd you grow up? Tell people a little bit about where Morgan came from. Let's talk about your origin story.
Yeah. So born and raised out of Atlanta, Georgia. And, Atlanta, Georgia is great, except for the sports teams that give us heartache and the traffic, right? So those are two things that suck, but it is what it is. And yeah, grew up, two younger brothers, mom and dad still together doing their thing. So grew up in a very Christian based home, which I don't really talk a lot about because no one ever asks the origin story. People are just like, oh, how'd you get into sales? But let's start from the beginning, right?
This is a more normal story than most people in sales.
Yeah, I know. Super whatever. And so, as I was growing up,
as a Southerner, Baptist, Catholic,
Baptist.
Okay.
Baptist. So went to church every single week. That was just a part of it, right? So again, nothing crazy. And as I continuously was going through high school, I realized that, okay, I wanted to leave. I wanted to go somewhere else. I was sick of Atlanta. I was sick of Georgia. Everybody was going to UGA. So I didn't go to UGA. I went to Auburn for a year and a half. And I realized when I went to Auburn that I wanted to come back because the major that I was in, just finance, I wanted to get more in sports management. I wanted to go be a sports agent. So I ended up going back to the University of Georgia, going back home to Georgia, and did a double major in finance and sports management. And then, Show Me the Money, Jerry Maguire, right? I saw that movie and I was like, this is it. I want to be a sports agent. And didn't pan out because they told me at the time I had to go to law school. Found out after you didn't even have to go to law school to be a sports agent. It kind of made me angry, but it is what it is. Then went to a local event here in Atlanta, and they told me about a company, Terminus, that was just starting up right at the time where I had graduated. And that's where I got into SDR work, sales. Read a blog post by Ralph Barcy about starting a YouTube channel. That's where the SDR Chronicles originated, and just started sharing my journey and best practices. And from there, that's what I've been doing. Try not to overcomplicate any process or tips I give. It's all stuff that I've taught other people through my team or I've done myself. So the content comes out naturally and organic, and that's really the background story. And then, joined JB Sales, been with him for 2.5 years, but really, there's a lot of stuff that happened in between all that stuff, but that's the origin story. That's how I've gotten here to where I'm at today.
What made you decide you liked sales? I mean, it's one thing to watch something from Ralph Barcy. He's a good friend of ours and we love him and know him, but sales is a conscious decision, right?
Yeah.
It's not like finance or accounting or any of those kind of,
Sure.
degrees or marketing, but you kind of have to decide, I'm going to go do this. So what prompted you to go do this?
The biggest thing for me was you had to grow as a person to be successful in doing this. And the more people that I talked to, I realized that You have to be an active listener. You have to make sure you're asking the right questions. You have to make sure that you're coming prepared. You got to make sure that you're organized. Like, these are all the things that make you a better person. And so I took that and realized, okay, if I can go do this in sales, if I can deal with the mental pressures that sales comes with, I should be able to do a lot of other things moving forward by understanding this skill set in this role. And
Did
so
you
that
feel like you needed to force yourself into an environment like that sort of demands the growth rather than being an accountant, where you still have the opportunity to grow as a person like that, but maybe it doesn't necessarily force you to grow and evolve?
I feel like I needed that force for that challenge, and because otherwise it's like, I had a finance major, so I went and saw an internship, and they were all just, not say they were chilling, but you have your model that you go with, and you just do your thing. If you understand the model, you're good. But in sales, you have to continuously be growing. Otherwise, you're going to get exposed because it's changing every other day. And so I knew if I put myself in that environment, I'm going to grow a lot faster than maybe another role that I would have taken.
Do you have examples in life where you've done that before, like growing up as a kid, where your path seems a little different, right? Were you the competitive sports kid? Were you the kid who, we talk about all the time, I sold baseball cards and Jolly Ranchers at an early age in school. Like, are there things from when you were younger that would have gone, oh, this is probably why I took sales too?
Yeah, I have a couple examples. One is, most people don't know this. In high school and at the later stages of middle school, I played a lot of video games. One video game that I heavily gravitated towards was Halo 2. And so, for context, for those you may have played or may have not, like, you get all the way up to level 50 is the max level. I got to level 48. So I got just really, really good at the game and ended up getting picked up by MLG team, which is semi-pro, pro level gaming. So that to me is what got me into like the competitive spirit, because every game, like, we were practicing, like we were in it. So that got me in just like a competitive spirit. And then as I got more into high school, I've been playing basketball for a while. I picked up basketball, and in basketball, we won 2 state championships as well. So I also picked up that competitive spirit. And the people on my team were all D1 NBA type players.
You must have been pretty good to be on the state basketball championship team.
Yeah. Now I got my Achilles partially teared over here, so I'm not as good. But back in the day, yeah, we played with Malcolm Brogdon, and he's in the league now, and other players that went D1. So I would say those 2 situations helped me. And then also I sold Pokemon cards, Richard. So I sold baseball cards, I sold Pokemon cards, and ended up almost getting expelled because I was selling too many Pokemon cards. So I put myself in these different situations, in these environments that challenged me, to help me get to that next level.
That's great. What do you like about the challenge? Like, where does that come from? Like, did somewhere even earlier than that, did something happen that sort of said, look, don't tell me I can't do this? Like, where did that come innate for you?
Yeah, so I was the oldest, but my younger brothers were gifted with intelligence off the charts. So my middle brother went to Harvard, right? Graduated, and now he's at Columbia grad school, right? My youngest brother graduated graduated high school early, like by 2 grades. So they just were like brilliant minds. And I never had that. So I was in classes, but I never understood school. I was never a fan of it. So I always felt like I was challenged to go do more. And I felt like I should have been the smartest because I was the oldest. So I always felt like I had to do different things so I could get that gratification of like me accomplishing challenges. And also I never was the best in the things that I had gone out and do. Like I was, I was always like second or third. So I always knew like, okay, I got to put more work in, and I have to go study more than people who have some innate talent. So I just have the ability, and my talent is to take information, things that I see, and improve upon it based on a book or a structure or what someone tells me. And so that always was ingrained in me.
The other thing that I think is a super talent of yours is the ability to implement feedback right away. Mm-hmm. You absorb this information, but unlike a lot of people, what I've noticed in the time that I've known you is information comes in and action happens very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. And how do you coach somebody in your mind? How would you coach somebody out there who gets the information and kind of knows what they should do or where they should go next, but struggles with the decision or struggles with the implementation or overanalyzes it and overthinks
Yeah.
it. I'm curious how you coach those kind of people. I know how I've done it in the past, and
For sure.
I'm blessed to not have the over-analytical gene. So I think that I'm more similar to you. Like Richard and I talk sometimes, and we'll have an idea, and like 30 minutes later, I'll have implemented the idea. And Richard's like, Jesus Christ, we probably should have thought of this, thought about this a little longer, right?
Richard's like, we should have gone to the lab.
Start with Richard.
Yeah. So
I'm
curious.
With me.
I think this is a super talent of yours, and so I'd love for you to share with the audience like how you think about that, how you coach people on that. What advice do you have for people?
Yeah, I'll definitely go into advice. I'm curious on your end, right? So Scott, how have you seen that through me and what I do? Because I think it'd be helpful for the audience to see how you see that.
So straight away, like you and I have had multiple conversations where I feel like I've given you my perspective or advice on something, and I'll literally notice you talk about it like the next day, right? In some of the work that you do and things like that. And so for me, hearing you say that that's how you are, information comes in and action kind of happens. Yeah. Even you read this blog by Ralph and then instantly start the podcast. Like, so I've seen you take action like that. And so that's why I'm curious, how you develop that. Do you just not have that over-analytical gene the same way I do?
Yeah.
If you have it, how did you silence it? Because I think that's really important perspective to give to people out there, because I know a lot of people struggle with this. Richard struggles.
Absolutely. So I overthink a lot of things. So Richard, I feel you on your overthinking perspective. The switch for me, and then I'll tell people how I help them coach through it, but the switch for me was realizing, wait, this person has seen this amount of success. Why would I not listen to what they have to say? And I also tell myself the worst case scenario is that it doesn't work and I move on. The best case scenario is it does work and it takes me to that level that I was aspiring for in the first place. So when I was in college, a lot of stuff that I did was informational interviews. I reached out to people that were in sports because I wanted to be a sports agent, like I told you guys. And I got a lot of feedback on like, hey, you should do this, you should do that. And I always ask them like, okay, so why don't people take your advice? And they're like, well, because they overthink it or they think that they know better. And I realized that I can't think that I know better someone who has a certain title because they've done those things. They've seen the obstacles. They've already gone through that journey. So my perspective always, like, if someone gives me advice on something, I'm like, okay, let me go execute it. Let's see if it works for me. And if not, it's completely fine. If it does, that's fantastic. And so I've always had that ability to do that. Now, in taking feedback, I've always struggled with because I don't like getting negative or constructive feedback, but I know that that's only there to help me. So then I just take that in, internalize it. If I don't like it, and I go do that. In terms of coaching people, I always tell them this: hey, look, like what you're already doing, you're already getting results on, but you don't know the unknown of what you could get more results on. So I'll sometimes post a post like, hey guys, you should do this. And people are like, well, where's the data on this, on this segmentation, on this industry? And I'm like, look, I don't know all the answers to that question, but you just need to go do it. Like, you're refuting with me, but you haven't even done one of these things. So until you do it, this conversation is null and void. And I get so frustrated.
Your test is already superior because you've at least done it once, right?
I've done it, and I've had other people execute on it as well. So like, if you're saying, oh, that doesn't work and you haven't done it, I'm questioning you now on like how you're going to say that doesn't work when you haven't even executed it. And so that's why I always tell people, don't overthink it, because you got to think about the worst case scenario. And the worst case scenario every single time with people's advice is that it doesn't work. And then you can say, hey guys, I tried this out and it didn't work. Here's why, and here's what I learned. And that's a story to tell for yourself, because now when you become that mentor, you can help your mentees go through something where you tried something out and didn't work. And I always just say, hey, look, let's just try it. I don't know if it's going to happen or not. And that's what the SDR Chronicles, one of the things was, hey, let's try it. Like, if it doesn't work, I'm the guy who made videos and no one liked. If it works, it's going to turn into a big thing. And so that is how I take that in.
That's great advice. I want to turn this into real world, because I know this about you, right? I remember when you were first considering to work for John, and I had already known you, I knew John, and I think you and I've talked about this. John said, "Hey, Richard, go talk to Morgan. I need to just sort of get an opinion on him." And I think the biggest concern, right, even by you, I remember talking to you about it, was, well, gosh, Richard, I've really just been an SDR. I haven't been a closer. How are people going to take me legitimately as a closer if I hadn't been in a closing role, right?
Mm.
Do you remember this conversation?
Oh yeah, I remember that conversation. We were at an event.
Yeah.
And we were in the back. You were like, "What up?" Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. But here's an example of, here's something you haven't done, and John was willing to take that risk on you, right? Because it was a legitimate concern, but I think we all kind of knew, but yeah, but he's Morgan, he's got it, he's got a good personality, he's LinkedIn famous, right? Like he's got all he's got it all down on paper. How did you implement, and I think this is a really good segue for people who are SDRs who are thinking about going into a closing role, right? You just sort of went about 6 levels, you punched way above your weight class because the right opportunity came at the right time.
Right.
How did you work yourself through that? How did you get that through you mentally once you sort of knew you had the gig with John?
So I reached out for advice. I knew that, okay, I know how to prospect, right? I know how to make videos, content, but discovery and closing, I had no idea. So what I did is I leaned on John heavily in the beginning, sending him my calls. But what I also did as well, knowing how busy John was going to be, like, and still coaching and being there, I knew that I had to go find other resources. So I reached out to Frank at Costello, now their sales off. I reached out to Kevin Dorsey. I reached out to Amira. I reached out to other people in my network that were willing to take the time to do role plays with me on discovery. And I said, hey, I'm going to do discovery with you. Like, give me the feedback. And that helped me out a ton because I was able to get VP level, C-level opinions from people who have done sales, who have done enterprise sales, who are being sold to, on their opinions on how to run sales cycles. So I knew that, hey, I just needed repetition to do it. But also I was, again, playing in a different game. And I know I couldn't just act nonchalantly. So I just did that. I listened to tons of podcasts, took notes, and I just tried out different things to figure out what my style is. And now I'm way more comfortable in my style. But that was a very difficult adjustment for me because I knew it was going to be hard for me to sell to VPs of sales when I had never been in a closing role before selling sales training, right? Yeah. So it was a massive adjustment for me. It was tough at the beginning. I think for like the first 6 to 9 months, it was tough. But after I did those role plays, read books, looked at LinkedIn posts, and implemented that advice, I did it because I can't just sit here and be like, oh, okay, yeah, I got this brand on SDR Chronicles. I'm good. You can't have that.
So you just said something. It took me, 6 to 9 months. If you had to go do it over, do you think you could nail that back down to 3 months?
Absolutely.
So what advice do you give that SDR who's looking for that next role, or that AE who's looking to move into
How can they shorten their timeline to success?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say the number one thing is understanding how you start a call and how you end a call. I think a lot of times people get on a call and they have a conversation and they started nonchalantly. They don't have upfront contracts. They don't ask what they're looking for. They're not getting the right information in the beginning, and then they don't close for next steps. I don't know what the stat is. You guys probably know what it is, but it's an insane stat where how many reps don't ask for the next step. They're just like, yep, I'll follow up next week. And it's like, yeah, you got to get that next step. And so I think a lot of times when I see like new AEs come into roles, and you guys can attest this as well, they don't ask for the next step. They just assume that, okay, I got an SDR feeding me leads, it'll be fine. And I think that's the number one thing you got to lock down is how do you start the call? How do you end it? I think number 2 was taking the time to talk to your customers and sitting down with them and understanding what their language is so you can ask the right questions.
Customers, not prospects, right?
Customers.
Yeah. Customers.
Like being like, okay, customer success, I'm going to sit with you on your calls this week because you got to understand what language they're talking. And that was helpful for me when I did it later down the line, but you got to make sure you talk to those customers. I think the third piece is putting yourself on mute when the prospect is talking. I do that a lot now. Like the prospect's talking, I put myself on mute so that I can't interrupt them and truly listen to what they have to say, take 3 seconds, and then follow up with the question and treat it as a conversation and not just like, hey, I have these route interrogation questions I have to ask. And I think the fourth thing that has helped me out a lot is continuously looping in other people. I think the biggest thing is that you have a great conversation with someone. You're like, awesome, this is my one person I need to talk to. Instead of, I think I saw a post on this, but like having deal insurance. Like, hey, who's the next person we got to bring in? Who else do we have to bring in? And then like the fifth thing I would say is making sure that you have the right people coming on your calls. I think a lot of times an SDR going to AE,
the right
internal
like, decision makers,
right decision makers, but internally in your company, like bringing in those people to be like, hey, we're going to bring so-and-so to the call. You want to bring so-and-so as well? I think I would try to go in solo mode in the beginning. Be like, nope, I got this. Instead of being like, wait, I got resources I can pull in to be successful. So those would be the 5 things that I feel like if I would have taken those more seriously, I would have definitely got that down in like 3 months for sure.
I like that phrase, deal insurance.
I started a lively debate not too long ago asking what's harder these days, the SDR role or the AE role. As the former king of SDRs and now somebody who's in the closing kind of role, is your opinion the same? Has it changed? What is your opinion on that particular debate? And don't sit on the fence like so many people try to do. Don't give me your fucking political speech, dude. Come on.
You won't let me.
Pick a side.
You won't let me.
Well, I don't want to hear, well, it depends on any number of 9,000 factors. Oh, shit. Come on.
All right. So my honest belief as of today is the SDR role is still the toughest role. And I'm gonna tell you why it is, right?
There you go. Morgan has spoken. Tell us
I'm gonna tell you why it is. And people are like, oh, Morgan, I don't agree with you. This is why. It's because it's getting harder and harder and harder to get people's attention, because there are way more SDRs out cranking bad emails, bad templates, etc. You don't see a lot of people on social media being like, hey, I just had a terrible discovery call. You don't see that a lot. You don't see a lot of people say, oh, that was a bad closing technique that rep had. It's always this SDR did a terrible job. So based on how many people are putting out this bad, not connotation, but bad reference and perspective on SDRs right now, it's a lot harder to get your job done, because even if you do it the right way, they may have gotten destroyed by other SDRs and BDRs that have ruined their appetite to take a meeting. And you have to use multiple channels. You have to use social, cold calling, videos, email. It's just a lot harder. And I feel like as of today, the SDR role is tougher, because also mentally it's tasking. Like, you hit your goal at the end of the month and it's like, good job, Eddie. You got to go do the same thing again, right? But if you close a deal, you hit the gong, people are fired up, CEO's giving you a high five. You schedule 200% of quota, people are like, oh, that's cool. You want to do that again? So I feel like the SDR role, because of those factors I just told you all, is the hardest. And also, HubSpot gives us the data every single year. Number one obstacle and struggle for reps is prospecting. So if it's the number one obstacle for all reps across the board, and your only role is to prospect, I see it as the toughest role. And again, I'm not discounting AEs because I'm closing. It's tough as well. But in terms of prospecting, no. But I'm saying, like, as the toughest one, it's got the SDRs.
That was great. I'm going to shift this, and I'm going to go deep with you, because we've had this conversation and we've never been able to follow up on it, and we've wanted to.
Yeah.
And you know where I'm going, I think, too. For those who don't know, Morgan's African American, and I've always had this belief that it's always tougher for people of different ethnicities, or even people of different genders, to succeed in sales. Yeah. And I'd love to talk to you a little bit about that. I'll sort of let you decide, do you want to go through, oh, I had this one experience, or here's how I've dealt with it. We had KD on, and he talked about being the only, right? And he was often the only African-American on the sales team, or the only, just different things. I'm curious how you've even had to approach that. I just would love to get your feedback, and hopefully in a way that others can take away from it.
Yeah. So I would say doing what I do on a daily basis is tough. And here's why. Because as I put content out there, there's a lot of things that happen from an external standpoint when people look at it. They're like, all right, cool. This dude's 27, right?
Yeah, so you get the age thing.
The age thing. He's African-American, So coming out there, he's posting every single day as if he knows exactly what he's talking about, which I try not to come off that way, but people could see one post and see that. And as well, I'm speaking in front of audiences. And sometimes there may be that senior rep who's been in sales for 20 years. And you're like, all right, we got this 27-year-old kid. Like, my kids are as old as you. Like, what are you going to tell me right now? And so those are things I deal with on a day-to-day basis. And it's also tough because there's not a lot of people I can talk to about that exact situation I just gave you.
Yeah.
So they could give advice like, hey, I have this one part of it, but not the whole thing I gave you. So the way I deal with it is I figure out ways to over-index what I have to do. And what I mean by that is I'm like, okay, how can I figure out creative ways to deliver this to the audience? How can I be innovative? What's something that no one's really thinking about? What can I be reading that maybe no one's touching on, like a psychology, et cetera? But it is a continuous struggle. And so a lot of stuff that I do is I always try to focus on, especially when I do training sessions, like time of value. Like in the first 10 minutes, I'm going to come up with something that you probably haven't seen before and that I've executed on and I've shown other people how to execute on that's led to their success. But in terms of being the only, I face that as well. Like I went to a private school. I was one of the 6 only Black people in the school, right? Even when I first started at my company, was the only Black rep. So all that stuff plays a factor. But what I see it as a advantage because it allows you to focus in and hone in on your skill sets because you have to be better in those situations than other people just because you're seen in a different light. And I know, again, being younger, being African-American, it's continuously tough for me because I know that there's always that sense of this person may not know what they're talking about. That's why I have to come more prepared than most. But again, because I'm coming more prepared, it allows me to build my skill set even faster. So that's the way I go about it.
It's interesting because that actually goes back to what you said earlier about how you felt about your brothers.
Yeah,
right?
For sure.
That sort of got built into you of okay, I've got to work a little bit harder, right? Yeah. These two are the geniuses. I'm the handsome one, right? I need both, right?
Yeah.
But do you find, and do you find that there's still racism in your level of sales? Do you think that when people meet you for the first time and they're like, oh, I had no idea that Morgan's African American, or do you feel well, at this point they should kind of know because they should go to LinkedIn? Do you still face that these days, or is it getting better?
They should, but at the same time, it's always there. It's subconscious.
Right.
Subconscious. Go back to Auburn. There were a lot of racist people at Auburn. We're in Alabama, right? But part of that has to do with, you got to think of their parents, their grandparents, their great-grandparents. They grew up the time where, MLK was there, right? The KKK was rampant. We had the Black Panthers, et cetera. So they grew up in that time. It's probably some of their grandparents were in the KKK. So they grew up in a racist household. So everything that we shape ourselves in the future is all based on our childhood. So if you went through that in your childhood, it's going to affect you moving forward, right? And so those are the things that I see and I face. And I know some people, if I have conversations with them, they probably have that racial perspective and they might not even know that I know that, but I do know that. And so it's still there. I think you can't say racism is completely dead. There are obviously some great people in the space that's not even a factor, but there are a lot of people out there that are like that. Absolutely.
How are you going about trying to be a mentor for folks in similar situation as you? Because you just said a little bit ago, you didn't have anybody to kind of go to, or even now there's very few people for you to talk to that are maybe at your level dealing with the same things.
Yeah.
But you are somebody that people younger, less experienced, than yourselves can go to. You have the ability to really, make an impact on a lot of people's lives. How are you prioritizing mentorship and being a guiding light, if you will, to some of these folks as they go about their career? You're an example to them, right?
Yeah, I take as many conversations as I can. I guess I got more time now, but before, with traveling every single week, it was really difficult for me to do that. But I knew that there was I knew that there was a lot of people out there that needed advice. And so I get reached out to, every other day asking for that help. And so what I'll do is I'll hop on that call and then really say, I give them that 30, 45 minutes to just ask me questions. If I have a question for them, it might be one question, but I really take that time to have conversations with people. So it's nothing crazy. I don't think it's anything really special. I just take the time where, some people may be like, I'm extremely busy. I'm like, no, like I really want to give that advice. And I always ask people before they get in the conversation, like, what exactly do you want to talk about? Like, I don't like.
I wrote about this yesterday. It's super hard when people come to you and they just have vague questions and advice, and it's so much easier when they can be very specific about these kind
exactly
of
like don't ask me about my background and like how I got here. Like that probably isn't that relevant to you because you're probably not gonna do the same exact thing as me. So I just want to know exactly why you reached out and what we can do. And some people may see that as an a-hole comment, but it's really not. I'm just trying to get to the root of what your problem is. Like you don't want to hear about my story for 20 minutes. I can send you a podcast episode that goes through that. Like we really need to have a real conversation while you have my 30 or 45 minutes of time.
How do you prioritize it though? And try to be real specific and tactical here if you can, because you say, well, I take all the calls that I can, but like with all the other things that you're doing every single day for work and your personal life and everything else, like how do you make sure you are prioritizing it? Do you like a day that's like Morgan mentors on Tuesdays? Is there particular hours of each day that you go about these things?
So that's a great question.
Phone calls? Is it emails? How do you see what I'm saying?
Yep. Phone calls, Mondays, late Friday afternoons are where it's blocked off.
Mondays block it off like that.
Yep. Mondays are my admin days. So I normally don't take any calls at all unless it's a podcast, internal meeting, or someone wants help. And then late Friday afternoon, 4 on normally, I'll be like, hey, if you want to talk for 30 minutes, we can. But Scott, how I weed out most people is when they ask for time, I say, what exactly do you want to talk about? You're shocked. You guys would be shocked how many people don't answer that question. That means people aren't serious.
I would be shocked because I experience it all the time.
People don't answer it. So then I'm like, okay, you weren't serious about this conversation. Then I move on. The people who answer that, I take the conversation and they go on to take the advice and they do well.
What kind of things do you wish they would say? Like you give people advice of like, hey, if I'm reaching out to Morgan or anybody for advice, what do you want them to say to you to make that? Because I think they know, but they're afraid. And in some cases they know, but they don't know how to ask for it. Right. And we all know you kind of have to get into discovery mode with these folks. We're happy to do it. But what do you give people advice on how to ask for advice?
So first off, answer the question. That's the first step.
Or better yet, lead in your intro and your outreach to Morgan, the other mentor, and be like, hey, Morgan, I got a very specific question tactically about this particular way that I'm trying to close a deal. How would you approach this?
Perfect.
But they just reach out, and then Morgan has to reach back and say, well, what do you want to talk about? And then some of these people ghost.
Yeah, and then it's like you weren't that serious. You just wanted to have a conversation to say that you talked to Scott, John, Katie, Rich, whatever, just to say that you got it. And that's why I started asking the question, because I realized how many people weren't serious about it. But Richard, I think to Scott's point, that's one thing. I think another thing is like be as like just what Scott said as well, be as granular as possible. I know somebody came to me and they're like, hey, look, I've been doing this voice message thing lately. I've sent about 20, but I feel like my value prop's a little off. I'm going to send you one, and can you listen to it to give feedback? Awesome. Send it to me. We had a conversation and now he's ready to go. So like, that is a great way of asking the question. If you're just like, hey, Morgan, I just want to hear about your background, I'm going to be like, what do you mean? I've done like thousands of episodes of podcasts that have my background. So if you listen to a couple episodes, you'll have that. We don't need to have a 30-minute conversation about my background. It's on LinkedIn, right? So like, those are things that like, I wish that would stop happening. What I would wish I'd start hearing is like, hey, Morgan, I'm in the security space and I want to build my personal brand. How would you suggest going about that? Cool. Let's have a conversation. Hey, Morgan, I'm being tasked to do 100 calls per day and I'm afraid to get on the phones and my intro has been weak as of late. Can we have a conversation on what strong intros look like and how I can implement it in my process? Fantastic. Let's talk, right? Hey, Morgan, I saw you were in London. I'm a London rep and I saw you train a couple of people in London. Can you give me advice on what you gave? Cool. Let's talk. It's paying attention. It's not like I'm not hiding. I post every single day. So there's enough content that you can ask me a contextual question.
Yeah.
If you really want anyone's advice, to be honest.
Agreed. Hey, we're running up against time here. Both you and I have a hard stop.
Yeah.
We talk and chat and text and whatnot all the time, but is there anything at the moment that Richard or I can kind of do for you and help you and be supportive?
Nothing really. I mean, the fact that like this podcast you guys got going on, I like how it's casual and it's real. I think a lot of people need that right now, in a positive light and some empowerment as we go into this mess that we're currently in. But nothing else. I know we got, next Monday and Tuesday. I know JB Sales where John's doing a training virtually. We got that going on. But other than that, hey, just follow me on LinkedIn. Check it out.
Yeah. Well, then I have a request for you. This is the first time I've ever asked. I've ever flipped it around and asked for help from one of the guests. You game?
Here.
You game. Okay. I think right now that some of us with some level of influence or voice out there in the sales community have a bit of a responsibility right now to try to be as helpful as possible to those who really feel like they need to close deals in order to eat.
Yeah.
And they're worried about paying bills and not just working from home, but losing their jobs. I already saw one message this morning where somebody lost their jobs because of the virus. And I feel a responsibility to speak out and try to protect people in sales leadership and sales roles from, undue demands on performance right now, given all the chaos going on. I'm pretty tired already of hearing about the downturn of 2008 and 9/11 and the .com bust and how everybody sold through that and you can sold through. Ain't nobody prepared for this shit right now. Okay. Nobody has gone through what we're going through right now before. And so I just really hope that people out there are able to be kind and share and be willing to donate their time and resources if they have it. And so my ask of you is, if you agree with that, if you can amplify and support these kind of messages, I'm sharing them all over the place on Twitter and LinkedIn right now. I think the more people like us that speak out on these things, hopefully we can create some level of influence and protect and help some people. And so that's my ask of you.
Yeah, absolutely. I had someone message me the other day and they told me that their entire sales team was downsizing because of what's happening. And I know a lot of people that are in the travel business, right? This is what they do, right? And they have to completely stall everything. And they're making massive pivots. So I know this is something that no one saw coming, right? To your point, but also this fast where it's like everything is shutting down. Like when I saw like sports leagues shutting down, events shutting down, Olympics might not even happen. We can't go to Europe. I was like, all right, this is different, right? Italy is not even, they can't even leave, right? So it's something we've never seen before. So I definitely support that, Scott.
Appreciate it. All right, man. Thanks for joining us as always, dude.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Morgan J Ingram, ladies and gentlemen, for Joseph. So
for Joseph, not made up.
Thanks for hanging out with us, man. We appreciate
all these Georgia boys and their trademark names.
Hey, ATL.
Yeah. And what happens when you don't trademark? Gary Vee steals it, right, Scott?
That's fact. Gary Vee stole a different process. Come on, Gary.
Oh gosh, I saw that post. It was funny.
Yeah. Not to Scott. Not funny at all. You see the smile. That smile on his face is anger.
He's like, nope.
Yeah, it's an angry smile.
All right. If you don't know Morgan, please find him on LinkedIn. Please find him at J Barrows. They're doing an online virtual training on Monday and Tuesday. I think this is going to drop on Monday, but if you haven't signed up for it, please go check it out. I'm sure it'll be on demand as well somewhere along the way. But Morgan, as always, we love you. We appreciate you. And we appreciate you just having a real conversation with us.
Yeah, absolutely.